The sun beat down relentlessly on the parched fields of Old Man Hemlock's farm, baking the cracked earth into a mosaic of despair. Elias Vance, 35 years old, felt the heat not just on his skin, but deep in his bones, a constant, gnawing anxiety that had become as much a part of him as the dust that coated his worn boots. For generations, the Vance family had coaxed life from this land, a sprawling 100 acres nestled in a forgotten corner of the valley, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of planting and harvest. Now, that rhythm was a discordant, fading melody. The last 2 seasons had been brutal, a cruel succession of droughts followed by unexpected, devastating hailstorms. The corn withered, the soybeans stunted, and the once vibrant tomato plants, the pride of the farm, struggled to produce more than a handful of stunted pale fruit. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Elias, with his strong, calloused hands, and a gaze that carried the weight of impending loss, stood by the irrigation pump, listening to its weary groan. It was always breaking down, another symptom of the farm's decline, another expense he could barely afford. The air hung heavy with the scent of dry earth and the distant hum of desperation. He'd already remortgaged the land twice, and the bank letters, stark white envelopes with bold red print, were piling up on the kitchen table, each one a fresh stab of dread. The final deadline loomed, a monstrous shadow, threatening to swallow everything he had ever known, every memory etched into the very soil beneath his feet. His grandfather's laugh echoing from the old barn, his father's patient lessons on pruning, his own childhood spent chasing fireflies through rows of burgeoning vegetables, all of it felt poised on the precipice of Erbia. Obliteration. The thought was a bitter taste in his mouth, metallic and sharp. His wife, Maria, worked tirelessly at the local diner, picking up extra shifts, her hands perpetually smelling of coffee and regret. Their 2 young children, Sophia and Matteo, were still too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. But Elias could see the quiet worry in Maria's eyes, the way she would glance at him across the dinner table, a silent question hanging between them. He felt the immense pressure of their hopes, their innocence, resting squarely on his shoulders. He was failing them, and the thought was a searing brand on his soul. It was mid-afternoon, the hottest part of the day, when a flash of vibrant color caught his eye near the edge of his struggling tomato patch. It was a girl, no older than 8 or 9, dressed in a bright pink sundress that seemed utterly out of place amidst the muted greens and browns of the field. Her hair, the color of spun gold, bounced as she skipped, her small hands clasped behind her back. She seemed to have wandered off the quiet county road, driven by a boundless curiosity that felt alien to the farm's grim reality. Elias rarely saw children around, especially not alone, and certainly not dressed like she was on her way to a garden party. He watched her for a moment, a faint frown creasing his brow. The edges of his property were fenced, a common practice in this rural area, but still, it was unusual. As she drew closer, he saw her eyes, wide and sparkling with innocent wonder, fixated on one of his struggling tomato plants. She reached out a hesitant finger, lightly touching a small green orb hanging from a spindly branch. Elias sighed, a weary sound that stirred the dust around his feet. He could shoo her away, tell her to leave, that this was private property. But something in her rapt attention, her genuine fascination with a simple tomato, stayed his hand. He remembered his own childhood curiosity, the endless questions he had asked his father about every leaf and every root. The anger and despair that had been bubbling within him momentarily receded, replaced by a faint echo of that lost wonder. He straightened up, brushing dirt from his worn denim overalls. "Well now, little lady," he called out, his voice gruff but not unkind, "you seem mighty interested in my tomatoes." The girl startled, her head snapping up. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, widened further, and she instinctively took a step back, like a startled fawn. She clutched a small, brightly colored children's book to her chest. "Oh, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice surprisingly soft and clear. I didn't mean to trespass. My mom is just down the road. She's on a call. She gestured vaguely towards a shimmering silver SUV parked a little ways off, partially obscured by a stand of poplars. Elias hadn't even noticed it. He offered a small, reassuring smile, trying to soften his weathered features. No harm done, just curious what caught your eye. This plant, she said, pointing a small finger towards the tomato. It looks so real and different from the pictures in my book. Do they all start out green? Elias knelt down, ignoring the ache in his knees. The sun warmed the back of his neck. Most do, yes, he explained, picking a small, firm green tomato from a lower branch. He turned it over in his palm. See? This little guy is just starting out. He needs a lot more sunshine, and a lot of water, and time, of course. Time to soak up all the goodness from the soil. He gently plucked another, slightly larger tomato, one that had begun to blush with a faint orange tint. This one here, he's getting there. He's seen a bit more sun. The green is starting to fade, and soon, he'll turn that beautiful, vibrant red. He held it out to her. Go on, you can touch it. Feel how firm it is. She hesitated, then reached out, her small fingers lightly brushing the fruit. Her touch was incredibly delicate, as if she were handling a precious jewel. It's smooth, she murmured, her eyes wide with genuine discovery. And it smells like dirt and sunshine. Elias chuckled, a rare sound that felt strange in his own ears. That's exactly right. That's the smell of honest work and good earth. You know, these are just things that grow, little lady. These are little miracles, each one of them. From a tiny seed, no bigger than a pinhead, they grow into this. He gestured to the struggling plant, then to the vast expanse of his fields, a silent plea hanging in the air. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of faith, and sometimes, his voice softened, tinged with a bitterness he couldn't quite hide, a little bit of luck. She seemed to sense the underlying sadness in his voice, her bright expression dimming slightly. What happens if they don't grow red? She asked, her concern innocent but perceptive. Well, he began, sighing. Then, they're no good for eating. Can't sell 'em. Can't feed anybody. Just goes back into the earth, which isn't all bad, mind you. But it means no food for us, and no money for the farm. He looked out at the rows of struggling plants, the vivid green leaves dulled by dust, the promise of harvest a distant, mocking mirage. He thought of the bank letters again, the encroaching deadline, the suffocating fear. This little girl, with her simple questions, had inadvertently touched the raw nerve of his deepest anxiety. Oh, she said, her voice filled with a child's pure sympathy. That's sad. I hope they all turn red for you. She looked at the tomato in her hand, then back at the vine. My mom says we get all our food from big stores. She buys everything. She says it's called Fresh Harvest Market. Elias nodded, vaguely familiar with the national grocery chain. He'd seen their commercials on TV. Slick productions with smiling families and overflowing produce aisles. He occasionally went there for things he couldn't grow himself, like bananas or coffee. Yep, most folks do nowadays. Not many farms left like this one. He gestured around, a sweeping, melancholy movement that encompassed the worn barn, the aging farmhouse, the tired fields. Not many places left where you can see where your food truly comes from. From the dirt. He picked up a handful of loose soil, dark and crumbly despite the dryness, and let it sift through his fingers. This is the heart of it all. It's not just dirt. It's living, breathing stuff, full of tiny bugs and fungi, and roots reaching deep for water. It gives life, if you treat it right, and if you're lucky enough to have it. And he rubbed his thumb over the small, still green tomato. See, this little fella? He's counting on this soil. And I'm counting on him too. He forced a smile, trying to lighten a heavy mood. My name's Elias, by the way. Elias Vance. I'm Lily, she announced, her smile returning, bright and unburdened. It's nice to meet you, Farmer Elias. They talked for a few more minutes. He showed her how to gently tap a tomato to feel its ripeness, explained the difference between a blight and a simple bud bite, and pointed out a ladybug meticulously devouring aphids. Lily listened with an earnestness that was both charming and disarming. Her questions were insightful for a child her age, revealing a mind eager to absorb knowledge. He found himself enjoying the unexpected company, the brief respite from his worries. For a precious few minutes, he was just a farmer, teaching a curious child about the wonders of the earth, not a man facing ruin. Then, a distant voice, sharp and authoritative, called out, "Lily! There you are, sweetheart. I was starting to worry." Lily's head snapped up. "Oh, that's Mom. I better go. Thank you, Farmer Elias. I hope your tomatoes all turn red." She waved goodbye, clutching her small green tomato carefully in one hand, her children's book in the other, and skipped off towards the silver SUV. Elias watched her go, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. He hoped so too, Lily. He hoped so too. He turned back to the weary pump, the brief interlude with the little girl, a fleeting warmth in the chill of his anxiety. He didn't notice the elegant woman with sleek, dark hair and an expensive, tailored suit emerge from the SUV, her eyes, sharp and intelligent, sweeping over his fields, then lingering on his stoic figure. He didn't see the brief, thoughtful conversation she had with Lily before they drove away. His mind was already back on the grim realities of failing pumps and mounting debts. The sun continued its descent, casting long, mournful shadows across the fields, mirroring the shadows in his heart. Days later, the memory of Lily's bright eyes and curious questions remained a gentle, almost poignant, counterpoint to the relentless grind of his daily struggles. He continued to work the land, patching leaks in old irrigation lines, meticulously checking each struggling plant, trying to coax life from the dry soil. But the truth was undeniable. The harvest would be poor, far too poor to make a dent in the looming debt. The bank's final notice arrived, a stark, unforgiving document that set a definitive date for foreclosure. It was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to lose everything. The paper felt cold and heavy in his hands, a death knell for the Vance legacy. Elias leaned against the kitchen counter, the scent of Maria's strong coffee doing little to lift the suffocating weight in his chest. He closed his eyes, picturing his grandfather, a man of endless optimism and calloused hands, walking these very fields. How could he have failed them so completely? How could he let their dreams turn to dust? He felt a deep sense of shame, a burning inadequacy that threatened to consume him. He had tried everything. He had experimented with drought-resistant seeds, sought advice from agricultural extension agents, even prayed for rain with a desperation that bordered on agony. But the weather had been relentless, the market unforgiving, and his resources, both financial and emotional, had simply dwindled to nothing. Maria, ever practical, had suggested they look into moving to the city, finding factory jobs, starting over. The thought was a raw wound. Leave the land? Abandon his heritage? It felt like a betrayal. Just 2 days after receiving the final notice, as Elias was stoically attempting to repair a leaky spigot on the old well, a dust cloud appeared on the county road, growing steadily larger. It wasn't the familiar, battered pickup truck of a local feed supplier or the county extension officer. This was a sleek, dark silver SUV, the same one he had vaguely noticed the other day, gleaming in the harsh sunlight. It turned off the main road and slowly, carefully, navigated the rutted dirt track that led directly to his farmhouse. Its polished exterior and tinted windows seemed utterly out of place, an alien vessel in his world of worn wood and cracked earth. The vehicle came to a silent halt a few yards from where he stood. The driver's side window purred down, revealing Lily's bright face, her golden hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She waved exuberantly. "Farmer Elias, look!" she exclaimed, holding up a plastic container filled with perfectly ripe, vibrant red cherry tomatoes. "They all turned red, just like you said." Elias managed a weak smile, genuinely pleased for her. "Well, I'll be. That's a fine harvest, Lily. Good for you." Then, the passenger door opened, and an elegant woman unfolded herself from the car. She was taller than he remembered, clad in a crisp, tailored linen suit the color of a summer storm cloud, a pair of expensive sunglasses perched on her nose. Her posture was impeccable, radiating an air of quiet authority. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and strikingly familiar. They were the same startling blue as Lily's, but held a depth of experience and determination that spoke of boardrooms, not tomato patches. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice calm and clear, yet carrying an undeniable weight of command. "My name is Victoria Sterling. This is my daughter Lily. She hasn't stopped talking about your farm and about these tomatoes since her visit the other day." She held out a perfectly manicured hand. "Thank you for being so kind to her. She was quite taken with your lesson." Elias took her hand, his calloused palm rough against her smooth, cool skin. Her grip was firm, confident. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Sterling. Lily's a good kid, always curious." He felt a prickle of unease. There was something in her demeanor, a quiet power, that made him instinctively wary. She was clearly not from around here. Not from his world. Victoria's gaze swept over his farm, lingering on the struggling fields, the faded paint on the barn, the weary tilt of the farmhouse porch. Her expression was unreadable, but Elias felt a blush creep up his neck, a sudden acute awareness of the farm's shabbiness, his own despair laid bare. "Lily told me you're a farmer," Victoria continued, her gaze returning to him, steady and assessing. "And she mentioned that growing tomatoes is difficult for you this year, that your crops aren't doing well." Elias felt his jaw tighten. He didn't like strangers prying into his business, especially not strangers in expensive suits and luxury cars. "It's been a tough few seasons, ma'am. Drought, hail, just bad luck, I suppose." He tried to sound nonchalant, but the words felt hollow, even to him. Victoria nodded slowly. "Indeed, the agricultural market can be unforgiving. Lily also told me that you sell your produce to local markets, perhaps? Mostly used to sell to a few roadside stands and a small co-op." Elias admitted, his voice flat. "But this year, there's not much to sell. The bank's moving to foreclose in a couple weeks, actually. So, won't be much of a farm left to sell from." He hadn't meant to blurt it out, the words escaping him like a confession, the weight of his secret too heavy to bear. He immediately regretted it, a surge of humiliation washing over him. Now this elegant stranger knew the full extent of his failure. Victoria's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps sympathy, crossed her eyes. "I see," she said quietly. "Lily also mentioned something else. She said you told her where she gets her food from, that it comes from a place called Fresh Harvest Market." Elias nodded, confused. "Yes, ma'am. That's what she said her mom told her." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Victoria's lips. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "I am the CEO of Fresh Harvest Market." The words hung in the air, suspended between them like a fragile, invisible bridge spanning two entirely different worlds. Elias stared at her, dumbfounded. The CEO? Of Fresh Harvest Market? The massive grocery chain with stores in every major city, known for its emphasis on fresh, locally sourced produce, its gleaming aisles and upscale clientele? The reality of her words crashed over him, a wave of shock that momentarily stole his breath. He had taught the daughter of a grocery magnate how tomatoes grew, completely unaware. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel, yet potentially miraculous, sense of humor. Victoria Sterling watched his reaction, a flicker of amusement in her eyes, mixed with something else, something deeper. "I can imagine that's quite a surprise, Mr. Vance." Elias shook his head, trying to clear the sudden fog in his brain. "A surprise is an understatement, Miss Sterling. I had no idea." "Of course not," she replied. "We try to keep our personal lives private, especially with Lily. But when she came back, absolutely buzzing about the farmer Elias who taught her about real tomatoes, and showed me the sad little green one she'd picked, well, it piqued my interest, especially when she said your crops were struggling, and then, and this." She gestured vaguely at the foreclosure notice he still held crumpled in his hand. "Mr. Vance," she continued, her tone shifting, becoming more direct, more businesslike, yet still infused with a strange warmth. Fresh Harvest Market is built on a philosophy of fresh, high-quality, sustainably sourced produce. We pride ourselves on connecting our customers with where their food comes from, and a core part of that is supporting local farmers, especially those who demonstrate a genuine passion for the land and their crops, even in difficult times. Elias listened, his heart beginning to beat a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Hope, a dangerous, fragile emotion he hadn't dared to feel in months, began to stir within him. Could this be it? Could this elegant woman, who had stumbled onto his farm by sheer chance, be the miracle he had been praying for? "We are always looking for new suppliers," Victoria went on, her gaze steady, piercing. "Especially for produce that has a story. Produce grown by hands that truly understand the earth. Your conversation with Lily, Mr. Vance, impressed her deeply, and it impressed me. Your quiet dedication, even in the face of hardship. Your respect for the land, even when it's not giving back. That's a quality we value immensely." Elias swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He found his voice, a little hoarse. What are you proposing, Miss Sterling?" A faint, confident smile finally bloomed on Victoria's lips, softening the sharp angles of her face. "Mr. Vance, Fresh Harvest Market would like to offer you a multi-year produce contract. We're interested in your tomatoes, of course, but also anything else you can grow to our specifications. We could help you with equipment upgrades, provide advice on sustainable farming practices, even offer an advance on your first harvest to help you get back on your feet. A substantial advance, enough to clear your immediate debts." Elias stared at her, speechless. The words, multi-year produce contract, equipment upgrades, substantial advance, echoed in his mind like the most beautiful symphony he had ever heard. It wasn't just a lifeline, it was a complete overhaul, a future he hadn't dared to dream of. It was salvation. "We believe in investing in our SAS partners," Victoria explained, sensing his shock. "And more importantly, we believe in people like you, Mr. Vance. People who love the land, who understand the rhythm of growth, who teach children like Lily the true value of a simple tomato. We want that story on our shelves. We want our customers to know that their fresh produce comes from a place like Old Man Hemlock's farm, cared for by a farmer like Elias Vance." Tears welled in Elias's eyes, hot and unexpected. He blinked them back fiercely, embarrassed by the raw emotion. He, a struggling farmer on the brink of ruin, was being offered a deal that could save his family's legacy, all because he took a few minutes to talk to a curious little girl about tomatoes. The irony, the sheer, improbable luck, was almost overwhelming. "Ms. Sterling," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. This would save the farm. It would save everything." "Then let's make it happen, Mr. Vance," Victoria said, extending her hand once more, this time in a gesture of partnership. "We'll send our agricultural procurement team out next week to assess your land, discuss your capabilities, and finalize the contract details. I assure you, it will be a fair and mutually beneficial agreement." Elias took her hand, his calloused fingers trembling slightly, but his grip firm with newfound hope. "Thank you, Miss Sterling. Thank you so much." He glanced over at Lily, who was beaming at him from the SUV, oblivious to the momentous conversation she had initiated, only happy that her farmer Elias C.S. seemed less sad. As Victoria returned to her SUV, Elias stood there amidst the dusty rows of struggling tomatoes. The bank's final notice still clutched in his hand, now utterly meaningless. The sun, which had felt like a relentless oppressor just moments before, suddenly seemed to shine with a new, benevolent warmth. The land, which had felt like a crushing burden, now seemed to breathe with renewed promise. A simple act of kindness, a moment of shared wonder over a green tomato, had, against all odds, yielded the most extraordinary harvest. The week that followed Victoria Sterling's unexpected visit was a whirlwind of activity and a torrent of emotions for Elias. The initial shock slowly gave way to a burgeoning sense of disbelief, then a fragile, almost terrifying hope. He found himself rereading the bank's foreclosure notice, no longer with despair, but with a strange detached curiosity, marveling at how close he had come to losing everything. The Bach. Thoughts sent a shiver down his spine. A stark reminder of the knife edge he had been living on. Maria, when he finally managed to explain the bewildering encounter, had first stared at him in wide-eyed silence, then burst into tears, tears of pure, unadulterated relief that washed away months of suppressed fear. The children, sensing the palpable shift in their parents' moods, seemed to breathe a little easier, their laughter returning with a brighter, more unburdened sound. On the appointed day, a gleaming black sedan, even more imposing than Victoria's SUV, pulled up the dusty drive. Out stepped two impeccably dressed individuals. One was a sharp-suited man in his 50s, Mr. Davies, Fresh Harvest Market's head of agricultural procurement, whose stern demeanor masked a surprising passion for quality produce. The other was Dr. Eris Thorne, a lean, thoughtful woman with kind eyes and a vast knowledge of soil science and sustainable farming practices, the company's lead agronomist. Their visit was thorough, meticulous, and surprisingly empathetic. Mr. Davies, despite his initial formality, spoke with a deep understanding of crop cycles and market demands. Dr. Thorne, with her gentle hands and keen eye, spent hours walking the fields with Elias, bending down to examine the soil, crumbling it between her fingers, testing its moisture content, its pH levels, its nutrient composition. She spoke not of his failures, but of the land's potential, of soil rejuvenation techniques, of water conservation strategies that were both cutting-edge and environmentally sound. She was genuinely impressed by his deep, intuitive understanding of the land, something she said was increasingly rare in modern agriculture. "Mr. Vance," she stated, her voice calm and authoritative, as they stood in the middle of his struggling tomato patch, the same one where Lily had first wandered. "Your soil has incredible character. It's tired, yes, but it has the memory of good harvests. With some strategic intervention, some careful nutrient balancing, and perhaps the introduction of cover crops to restore its vitality, we can see remarkable improvement. Your instincts about the land are sound. You simply haven't had the resources to implement the necessary changes." Mr. Davies, meanwhile, was all business, but with a surprising flexibility. He presented a draft of the multi-year contract. It wasn't just a promise, it was a detailed, legally binding document outlining the specific quantities of various produce items Fresh Harvest Market would commit to buying from him each season at guaranteed, above-market prices. The initial advance was indeed substantial, more than enough to cover the bank's impending foreclosure and provide a significant cushion for the first year's operational costs, including new equipment. It even included provisions for technical support from their agronomists, access to advanced farming techniques, and assistance in obtaining necessary certifications for organic air, sustainable practices, should Elias choose to pursue them. Elias sat at his old, worn kitchen table, the contract spread out before him, its pages rustling like autumn leaves. Maria sat beside him, her hand gripping his, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. It felt too good to be true, a dream spun from desperation. But Mr. Davies and Dr. Thorne were patient, answering every question, explaining every clause. They emphasized Fresh Harvest Markets, commitment to long-term relationships with growers, their desire for stability in their supply chain, and their genuine belief in supporting local economies. "Our CEO, Ms. Sterling, is very clear on this, Mr. Vance," Mr. Davies stated, his gaze direct. "She sees this as more than just a business transaction. She sees it as an investment in a philosophy. The story of Old Man Hemlock's farm, your dedication, your family's history on this land, that's something we can market. Our customers connect with that authenticity. This isn't charity. It's smart business for both of us." Elias looked at Maria, and she nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. But this time, it was a tear of pure, unadulterated joy. The weight of years, the suffocating fear of ruin, lifted from his shoulders, leaving him feeling lighter, almost buoyant. He reached for the pen, Signing the contract was a surreal moment. It wasn't just his signature on paper. It was a pledge, a rebirth. The next day, the wire transfer hit his account. The numbers a bewildering sum that wiped away the looming debt and provided a buffer against future anxieties. He immediately called the bank, his voice steadier than it had been in months, informing them that the foreclosure was off. The bank representative, initially skeptical, was quickly silenced by the mention of Fresh Harvest Market's name. The power of a major corporation, he realized, was immense. The farm underwent a transformation over the next few months. Elias, with renewed energy and the substantial advance, invested in new, efficient irrigation systems that minimized water waste. He bought modern, well-maintained machinery, replacing the ancient, temperamental equipment that had caused him so much grief. Dr. Thorne visited frequently, guiding him through soil enrichment programs, introducing him to innovative pest control methods that reduced the need for harsh chemicals, and helping him diversify his crops beyond just tomatoes. They planned for peppers, eggplants, unique heirloom varieties of squash, and even a small patch of specialty herbs, all tailored to Fresh Harvest Market's demand. Elias found a deep satisfaction in learning these new techniques, in embracing a more sustainable, holistic approach to farming. He was no longer just fighting to survive. He was thriving, innovating, building a better future for his land and his family. The fields, once parched and forlorn, slowly began to reclaim their vitality. Cover crops, planted in rotation, brought a lush green to acres that had lain fallow, enriching the soil for the next season. The air buzzed with the healthy hum of new equipment, a stark contrast to the weary groan of the old pump. Lily, as it turned out, became a regular visitor to the farm. Her mother, Victoria, would often drop her off on weekends, or sometimes even accompany her. Victoria, shedding her corporate armor, would walk the fields with Elias, asking questions, genuinely interested in the progress of the crops. She spoke of her own childhood, growing up in a small town, far removed from the corporate world she now inhabited, and revealed a surprising appreciation for the simple rhythms of nature. She admitted that while she understood the vast supply chains of the grocery business, seeing the produce grow from seed to harvest on a farm like Elias's, experiencing it firsthand through Lily's eyes, rekindled a connection she hadn't realized she'd lost. "It's easy to forget, isn't it?" Victoria mused one sunny afternoon, watching Lily eagerly helping Elias plant young pepper seedlings, her small hands surprisingly deft. When you're dealing with millions of pounds of produce, hundreds of suppliers, logistics, marketing, you lose sight of the individual plant, the individual farmer. Lily brought that back for me. She brought you back to me, in a way, the heart of what we do at Fresh Harvest Market. Elias smiled, understanding. The initial awkwardness between them had long since melted away, replaced by a comfortable, respectful rapport. He found her sharp mind stimulating, and she found his earthy wisdom refreshing. Their worlds, once so disparate, had found an unexpected point of convergence. Lily, meanwhile, continued to be his most enthusiastic apprentice. She learned about crop rotation, the importance of bees for pollination, and how to identify different types of beneficial insects. She kept a small, worn notebook, sketching plants and jotting down observations in a childish scrawl. Elias saw a little piece of himself in her, the boundless curiosity, the unfeigned wonder at the natural world. She reminded him of why he loved this land, why he fought so hard for it. The first harvest under the new contract was a momentous occasion. The tomatoes, no longer stunted and pale, ripened into perfect, plump, vibrant red orbs, heavy on the vine. The peppers were crisp and colorful, the heirloom squashes exquisitely shaped. Fresh Harvest Market sent a fleet of refrigerated trucks, not the usual beat-up local lorries, but gleaming white vehicles emblazoned with the familiar green and gold logo. Elias watched, a lump in his throat, as his produce, lovingly cultivated, was carefully loaded onto the trucks, bound for stores hundreds of miles away. It was a harvest of hope, a harvest of redemption. The financial security brought a profound peace to Elias and Maria. The anxious glances across the dinner table were gone, replaced by smiles and quiet plans for the future. They talked about expanding the farmhouse, about sending the children to better schools, about finally taking a short family vacation. The farm, once a source of crushing anxiety, was now a wellspring of quiet prosperity, humming with new life and purpose. The relationship with Fresh Harvest Market deepened over the years. The contract was renewed, then expanded. Elias became one of their most trusted and valued suppliers, his farm a flagship example of their commitment to quality and sustainability. Dr. Thorne continued her regular visits, now more as a friend and collaborator than a consultant, always bringing new ideas, new seed varieties, new techniques for Elias to explore. Mr. Davies, surprisingly, became a regular attendee at the local farmers market, where Elias still sold a small portion of his specialty produce, often just to chat and sample the latest offerings. A gesture of respect that spoke volumes. Lily, as she grew older, never lost her connection to the farm. She spent every summer there, learning alongside Elias, her golden hair now a cascade down her back, her small notebook replaced by a more sophisticated journal filled with detailed observations and even ideas for new produce lines. She brought friends from the city, showing them, with fierce pride, where her real food came from. She even started dreaming of studying agricultural science, a path Elias never would have imagined for her. One crisp autumn afternoon, years after that initial encounter, Elias stood with Victoria on a gentle rise overlooking his fields. The land stretched out before them, verdant and thriving, a tapestry of greens, golds, and reds. The irrigation systems hummed softly, and the new barn, built with the advance from the contract, stood gleaming in the distance. The air smelled of rich earth and ripe tomatoes. "You know, Elias," Victoria said, her voice soft, contemplative, "Lily still talks about that day. The day you taught her about the green tomato. She calls it the day she learned magic." Elias chuckled, a deep, contented sound. "It was magic for me too, Victoria. You showing up, that was the real magic." He turned to her, his gaze sincere. "You saved this farm. You saved my family. You saw something in a struggling farmer that nobody else did." Victoria shook her head, a gentle smile on her lips. "No, Elias. You saved yourself. You had the heart, the knowledge, the dedication. We just provided the opportunity. And Lilia, she just happened to be the one who opened the door. She saw the magic in you, and in that little bow, green tomato, first." She paused, then added, "It was never just about a contract, Elias. It was about recognizing value. And sometimes, value isn't found on a balance sheet. It's found in the dirt, in the hands that work it, and in the honest curiosity of a child." He looked out at the fields, the sunlight glinting off the leaves, the promise of a bountiful harvest stretching before him. He thought of the journey, the despair, the unexpected grace, the profound transformation. A single, curious question from a little girl had indeed changed everything, bridging the seemingly unbridgeable gap between a struggling farmer and a grocery empire, proving that the deepest connections and the greatest salvation can often sprout from the most unexpected soil. The farm thrived, a testament to resilience, partnership, and the quiet power of a green tomato. And Elias Vance, the struggling farmer, was struggling no more. His legacy, once threatened, was now firmly rooted, flourishing under the benevolent sun, nurtured by the most unlikely of alliances. The farm had become a living, breathing entity, a vibrant ecosystem where traditional wisdom met modern innovation. Elias, no longer burdened by the immediate threat of financial ruin, found his mind freed to experiment, to innovate in ways he hadn't dared before. Dr. Thorne introduced him to the concept of agroforestry, integrating trees and shrubs into his farming system to enhance biodiversity, improve soil health, and even provide additional income streams. They planted rows of elderberry bushes along the field edges, their vibrant berries appealing to Fresh Harvest Market's growing demand for specialty ingredients for jams and juices. Beneath the rows of new fruit trees, Elias experimented with companion planting, using marigolds to deter pests and nitrogen-fixing legumes to naturally enrich the soil. The farm began to hum with a different kind of life, a broader spectrum of flora and fauna, attracting more beneficial insects and birds, creating a truly sustainable cycle. His local community, initially just relieved that the Vance family wasn't being forced off their land, started to notice the transformation. Other small farmers, facing similar struggles with climate change and market pressures, began to approach Elias. They saw the lush fields, the consistent yields, and the reliable income, and they wanted to know his secret. Elias, never one to hoard knowledge, became a mentor. He organized informal workshops, sharing the sustainable practices he had learned from Dr. Thorne and his own practical experience. He showed them how to implement drip irrigation systems, how to read their soil, how to approach large corporations with confidence. His farm became a small, localized beacon of hope and practical knowledge for the struggling agricultural community. Maria, too, found new purpose. With the financial stability, she reduced her hours at the diner and dedicated more time to the farm, taking on the role of managing the administrative side of the expanded operations, something Elias, with his preference for hands-on work, had always found tedious. She became adept at tracking orders, managing inventory, and communicating with Fresh Harvest Market's logistics department. Her organizational skills, honed by years of managing a busy household and a demanding diner job, proved invaluable. She even started a small, online presence for Old Man Hemlock's farm, sharing photos of their thriving crops and snippets of their farming life, connecting directly with consumers who appreciated the transparency and the story behind their food. This direct engagement, driven by Maria, further endeared them to Fresh Harvest Market, who were always looking for compelling narratives to share with their customer base. The relationship between Elias and Victoria Sterling continued to evolve. Their meetings, initially formal business discussions, transformed into more relaxed conversations, sometimes over coffee at Elias's kitchen table, sometimes during walks through the burgeoning fields. Victoria would bring updates from the corporate world, sharing insights into consumer trends and new initiatives at Fresh Harvest Market. Elias would offer his perspectives on the realities of farming, the unpredictable challenges of weather, the nuances of soil health, the simple joys of a perfectly ripened fruit. They discovered a mutual respect, an appreciation for each other's vastly different worlds, and the unique challenges they faced. Victoria, often surrounded by statistics and spreadsheets, found a grounding presence in Elias's down-to-earth wisdom. Elias, at times overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the grocery business, found clarity in Victoria's strategic thinking. One particularly telling moment occurred during a corporate retreat Victoria organized for her executive team. Instead of a lavish resort, she chose a rustic lodge near Elias's farm and arranged for her top executives to spend a full day working alongside Elias in the fields. It was a revelation for her team. Accustomed to air-conditioned offices and abstract financial models, they found themselves sweating under the sun, their hands in the dirt, learning to prune tomato plants and harvest squash. Elias, with his patient guidance, became their unlikely teacher. "It's one thing to read a report about sourcing local produce," Victoria explained to her mud-splattered executives during a lunch break, her own hands stained with earth. "It's another entirely to feel the soil, to understand the labor, to connect with the very real hands that cultivate the food we sell. This is the foundation of our business, gentlemen and ladies. This is where the magic truly happens." Her gaze met Elias's across the picnic table, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. That day, Elias wasn't just a supplier. He was an integral part of their corporate identity, a living embodiment of their brand values. Lily, now a preteen, was still Elias's most dedicated farmhand. Her summers were spent entirely at the farm, much to her mother's delight. She had started a small, experimental plot of her own, trying out new, exotic vegetables she'd read about, diligently documenting their growth, struggles, and successes. She even convinced Elias to try growing purple carrots and striped tomatoes, varieties that, surprisingly, found a niche market within Fresh Harvest Market's specialty produce section, a testament to Lily's innate knack for spotting unique appeal. Her fascination with agriculture had deepened, evolving from childish curiosity into a serious passion. She spoke less about magic now, and more about biodiversity and sustainable yields, but her eyes still held that same boundless wonder when she unearthed a perfectly formed potato or plucked a ripe berry from a bush. Elias often reflected on the profound chain of events that had led him to this point. If he hadn't been so disheartened that day, if he had simply shooed Lily away, if he had given in to despair, and the bank, his life, his family's future, would have taken a drastically different, darker turn. The immense pressure he had felt, the sense of failure, had been almost unbearable. Now, that pressure had transformed into a joyful responsibility. He wasn't just farming for survival. He was farming for growth, for innovation, for a community that looked to him, and for a family that thrived. The Vance legacy, once teetering on the brink, was not only saved but reimagined, a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the unexpected power of a simple, shared moment of kindness. Years passed. The children, Sophia and Mateo, grew up on a farm that was no longer struggling, but vibrant and prosperous. They learned the rhythms of the land from their father, not out of grim necessity, but from a place of abundance and joy. Sophia developed a keen interest in agricultural marketing, seeing the potential in their farm's unique story. Mateo, with his quiet strength, gravitated towards the practical aspects of farming, eagerly learning how to operate the machinery and care for the soil. Lily, as predicted, went on to study agricultural science at a prestigious university, often returning to Old Man Hemlock's farm for internships and research projects. Her presence was always a welcome sight, a reminder of the serendipitous beginning of it all. She brought fresh ideas, cutting-edge research, and a youthful enthusiasm that energized Elias. She often joked that he was her first and best professor, even before she stepped foot in a lecture hall. The relationship between Old Man Hemlock's farm and Fresh Harvest Market blossomed into a model partnership, frequently cited in industry publications as an example of successful farmer-retailer collaboration. Victoria Sterling ensured that Elias's farm received prominent recognition in Fresh Harvest Market's marketing campaigns, featuring his story, his commitment to sustainability, and even photos of Elias and Lily working in the fields. This authenticity resonated deeply with consumers, driving sales and fostering brand loyalty. One particular winter, a particularly harsh cold snap threatened to devastate early spring crops across the region, causing widespread panic among farmers. However, Elias, thanks to Dr. Thorne's earlier advice and the financial means provided by Fresh Harvest Market, had invested in specialized hoop houses and frost protection systems. His farm, while impacted, suffered significantly less damage than many others. Fresh Harvest Market, facing a potential shortage, relied heavily on Elias's resilience, and he was able to provide a crucial supply of early greens and root vegetables, solidifying his indispensable role in their network. This event served as a powerful validation of their long-term investment in him, proving the strategic foresight of Victoria Sterling's original decision. Elias, in turn, felt an immense loyalty to Victoria and Fresh Harvest Market. He knew that without them, he would have lost everything. He meticulously maintained the quality of his produce, often going above and beyond the contract's requirements, ensuring that every shipment was perfect. He saw his role as not just a supplier, but a custodian of trust, a partner in a shared vision. Victoria Sterling, now approaching retirement age, often spoke of Elias and Old Man Hemlock's farm as one of her proudest achievements at Fresh Harvest Market. It wasn't about the financial numbers, though those were excellent, but about the human connection, the story of resilience, and the tangible positive impact on a family and a community. She had transformed a corporate entity into something with a soul, a human face that resonated with her customers. One warm summer evening, years after Lily's first visit, Elias sat on the porch of his now beautifully renovated farmhouse. The air was soft, filled with the scent of blooming tomatoes and damp earth after a gentle evening rain. Sophia was away at agricultural college. Mateo was discussing crop yields with a local co-op on the phone from the new packing shed, and Maria was humming contentedly in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Lily, now a bright, articulate young woman pursuing her master's degree in sustainable agriculture, was walking through the fields, sketching in her journal, a headlamp illuminating her path. Elias watched her, a profound sense of peace settling over him. His hands, though still calloused, no longer trembled with anxiety. His back, though aching after a long day, felt strong and purposeful. The debt was a distant memory, the fear of foreclosure, a nightmare long since banished. Lily eventually came up to the porch, her face alight. "Farmer Elias," she said, using the affectionate title she'd given him all those years ago. "I just saw the most incredible thing. A new species of butterfly, I think. It was fluttering around the elderberry bushes." Elias smiled. "That's wonderful, Lily. This land, it's full of surprises, isn't it? Full of life." Lily nodded, then looked out at the fields, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, when I was little, I thought you were just a farmer who taught me about tomatoes. But you were so much more. You taught me about resilience, about hope, about how everything is connected. And you taught my mom too, in a way." You opened her eyes to the real meaning of food. Elias looked out at the vast expanse of his thriving farm, bathed in the soft twilight. He thought of the tiny green tomato that had started it all, the humble beginning of an extraordinary journey. He thought of Victoria, the powerful CEO who had seen beyond his struggles to the inherent value of his passion. He thought of Lily, the curious girl whose innocent questions had inadvertently forged a bridge between two vastly different worlds, saving his legacy and transforming his life. "It's true, Lily," Elias said softly, his gaze sweeping over the fields that now hummed with abundance. "Sometimes, the smallest seeds grow the biggest miracles. And sometimes, the most important lessons aren't taught in a classroom, but right here, in the dirt, by the simplest of things, like a green tomato." He took a deep breath, the scent of fresh earth and growing things filling his lungs, a smell that now spoke not of despair, but of profound gratitude and a flourishing future. The legacy of Old Man Hemlock's farm, once a whisper on the wind, was now a vibrant, undeniable chorus, singing of salvation and unexpected bounty.